Hi, everyone. Welcome to the local Pakistan focused VC panel. It's a pleasure to be here today in Park Launch's first conference. It's been a tremendous year. In 2021 alone, we've had more than $230 million come into the ecosystem. I think in the last 18 months, we've seen our active smartphone user touch 100 million. So I'll start off asking the panelists here, what do you think has led to the recent surge of capital in the ecosystem? And how do you foresee this over the coming 3 years? I'll start with Rabil.
Thank you for having me, Faisal. I think there are three main themes or factors that are contributing to this. One is there's just a risk-on environment globally, searching for yield, and we all know about the attractive demographic opportunity in Pakistan, and that search for yield or like returns has led a lot of investors to focus on Pakistan recently. Second thing is I think there's more actionable deal flow now. Our founders are a lot more articulate in sharing that story. They have the base traction at the ground level to be able to make a case for why additional funding would allow them to capture market share. And I think that's leading to like a lot more inflow of capital into the market. And I think the third is an overall more enabling environment, partly contributed by like regulators, authorities in the country, and just overall people not kind of weighing Pakistan down from a risk perspective and just kind of putting it in a different bucket. I think all of those factors together have led to this recent surge.
With that, Ali, you just one of your portfolio companies just raised probably the biggest round in Pakistan's history, Airlift, with I think it was $85 million. Are you just as bullish over the next 3 years? And tell us about what you've seen over the last 12 months and where you see things going in terms of the capital inflow.
We're very, very bullish, Faisal. So we've been actively investing. We have now in total made over 15 investments within the last 12 months. A couple of them, yet to be announced. And we're going to continue to, invest. I think the key reasons, as mentioned by other panelists to us, are, a combination of factors coming together. Number one being, first and foremost, being talent. Then the right infrastructure. As you compare this to other ecosystems, one important factor that we saw is post the launch of, 3G, 4G infrastructure, a venture starts to really take off 5 to 7 years from that point. We saw this in Egypt, we saw this in India, we saw this, in early 2000s of China. And that's really what's happening. Pakistan had this launch in 2013, 2014, and now you have over 100 million, connected users, which is, essential for building consumer-focused internet companies. And lastly, obviously, the right policy infrastructure. All these three factors coming together, coupled with both domestic, leaders, that are present on this panel, on the receiving end in Pakistan, enabling other foreign investors to also look at the market. So we're very bullish for what the years to come.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I think we've all seen in the ecosystem is that effectively waves of interest comes in terms of e-commerce, then mobility, then we saw the grocery plays, B2B. So in your respective opinions, over the coming 24 months, what sectors do you think are going to be the most critical? I mean, we've seen the recent surge in fintech. So I'd like to get each one of your opinions on this. I'll start with the Khurram. Let me know your thoughts on this.
All right. I thought it was going to be third all the time. It was a bit difficult to come after Rabil and Misbah. Well, so look, one of the biggest strengths of the Pakistani market is its consumers. Right? It's a massive market, 210, 215 million people, 100 million of them, more than half of them now, connected to the broadband internet, and sort of facilitating, paving the path for distribution of technical products and services. So you obviously, the low-hanging fruit is, a lot of the consumer plays. But then, when you sort of build your thesis, at least the way we do it, we also look at some of the global trends, right? So you don't want to be in markets where there's a lot of consolidation, concentration with very large global players, right? It wouldn't make sense, for example, to build a search engine in Pakistan. Google has already taken care of that for the rest of the world. So for digital products, we look at opportunities that are still fragmented. There's no single big players internationally, because that offers you an opportunity to build something in Pakistan, not just for the Pakistani market, but also for the global market. The second thing we look for is sort of coming together of the physical and the digital both, where businesses require some physical presence and on the ground boots to be successful, right? Because otherwise, a lot of these large companies in the US and Europe and China, they could just come over and just acquire users like crazy and beat any competition in Pakistan. So we look for opportunities where there's, one of our investments is Healthwire, for example. It has gone out, onboarded thousands of doctors and clinics and hospitals and labs and pharmacies, and sort of created this network that now they're in the process of monetizing by focusing on the patient side. That's a classic example. Something Vendy is another investment where we're putting vending machines, the physical machines, all over Pakistan.
Yeah.
So those are the two areas that we filter our opportunities with.
Misbah?
Yeah, I think you mentioned fintech already, Faisal. I think fintech will continue to grow.
Yeah.
I think it's slightly fragmented right now. Obviously, fintech itself is a very broad sort of space. Our research team just came out with a fintech briefing where they talked about the different verticals. So there's obviously everything from mobile payments and going all the way to insurtech, etc. So a lot of opportunities in fintech. I think that's going to continue, and that's going to also be pushed on by the kind of regulatory changes that have been coming recently and that we foresee to continue to come. I think that a couple of the areas which we're excited about, we're looking at EdTech also. One of our companies at CASA is in the EdTech space. I think EdTech is a big opportunity, and people have become a lot more comfortable after COVID, looking at education online. So I think there's going to be increased adoption and there's a very wide open space right now in terms of the opportunities that startups can actually bring in EdTech. I think beyond that, Khurram and Ali mentioned some of the others in terms of logistics, etc. I think one area where we would love to find more opportunities and that I'm bullish about is B2B SaaS, because that has been shown in other markets as markets mature, that those plays that come in are actually great from an investment perspective and also become a backbone of solutions that can be built for B2C businesses beyond that.
What I would say is we're all essentially investing in the future. I mean, our job as venture capitalists is to kind of try to predict the future, and hopefully we're somewhat right and get returns for our investors. So in each of your respective views, how do you see the Pakistan story playing out over the next 10 years? So let's leapfrog into 2030 and visualize where the country sits. So I'll give you my synopsis in a very a quick summary. The way I look at it is very simple, is that Pakistan is closest comparable is India. So India's stock market is effectively roughly around $2.4 trillion in terms of the aggregate market cap today. In about 10 years, it's projected to be, through Morgan Stanley, your previous entity, it's projected to be, I think, somewhere around close to $7 trillion, right? And of that, if I look at it from a S&P 500 perspective, where 30% is aggregate as tech, so let's extrapolate and say $1 trillion of valuations of the overall market cap in India are tech, right? And Pakistan will be some subset of that. Whether it's, I don't think it's 10%, maybe it's 5% or 3%, but that actually results in billions and billions of dollars of aggregate market caps. And I think 2021 shows us the early signs of it. Excellent. Ali, your take on this?
No, I definitely think Pakistan is on the right track to, in the next 10 years, to be over $1 billion in venture investments, creating multiple unicorns in fintech, e-commerce, multiple other sectors that are emerging. So we're definitely on that track. One very interesting thing that we're noting is, on the company level, the companies are transforming and already doing what some of the late stage companies and other ecosystems are doing much earlier on, given the information flow from other markets, and then they've already seen how different models evolve. So in terms of how companies develop and grow, we're seeing a much faster trajectory as the market is developing compared to what we saw in early days of China and then Southeast Asia and some of the other markets. So we're definitely very bullish and expect this to be over $1 billion in venture.
And Rabil, so SPACs are coming into play, and we've seen effectively valuations, and that's why I'm not being very conservative on that number. In the interest of time, I would say, what would you think is that number, and what is your justification? The aggregate market cap of tech ventures.
I think a lot of the capital that's coming in right now is going to generate a return. We are also going to be burnt in some places, because obviously a lot of this is really trying to determine where the returns stack up, relative to the opportunity as well. And I think if I was a betting man, which I must maintain I'm not, despite my career, I would say we're north of $10 billion aggregate market cap just for startups, or however you define the tech ecosystem to be. And relative to where overall market is, this is going to be the highest growth segment, and also the highest value creation segment. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into it, but each one of our checks that's going in is expecting a 10x plus return on that capital. So if we're sitting at $250 million this year invested, in the coming years, if you have $1 billion or $2 billion hit in a single year, a lot of that capital is going to generate a return. So I think I would put my money on this being north of a 10 billion mark in a few years' time.
So let's start off, and I'll come to Misbah first. What do you see Pakistan's tech ecosystem as in 2030, and the country in terms of digitization?
Yeah. I mean, I think the kind of pace we've seen in the last 6 months is already showing that kind of extrapolation, and that's picking up of speed in terms of activity, rounds, quality of founders, etc., and then opportunities being tapped into. So I definitely see that's going to continue. Of course, business cycles come and go, so they will see some dips, but I think the trajectory is going to continue to stay positive. You mentioned India. I actually think if we look at Egypt and Indonesia and look at the trajectories that those markets have taken, I'm actually quite confident that Pakistan will be able to surpass the kind of growth that we've seen in those markets. And that growth is by no means small numbers. So in terms of markets, I think if you look at Indonesia and Egypt and see the kinds of companies that have thrived there, I think we actually are very well positioned right now to actually even overtake that. And I feel like that's going to happen in the next 5 years. We don't even have to wait a decade for that. So I definitely see a proliferation in the kinds of solutions that are being offered, people getting much more tech savvy. We have such a young population, majority is Gen Z at the moment. So all of that is going to continue to accelerate. And I think definitely it might take some time for us to catch up to India, but I definitely think that we're going to overtake regional markets fairly quickly and easily probably by 2030.
Well, thank you everyone for being on this panel. It was really a pleasure, and we look forward to doing this again in the future. Thanks.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.